The snow fell thick and silent over the rugged mountain valley, blanketing the world in a cold, reverent hush, as if nature itself had paused to witness a quiet turning point. At the heart of the wilderness stood a solitary log cabin, its weathered timbers darkened by years of wind and storm, smoke curling from its chimney like a weary breath. Inside, firelight flickered against rough wooden walls, offering warmth that pushed back the cold but could not fully chase away the loneliness that had settled there long ago. Alexander Grayson stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, a man shaped by isolation and survival, his expression hardened by years spent trusting nothing but the mountains. When he saw the woman approaching through the falling snow, his gaze sharpened with caution. She moved slowly but with resolve, her worn dress clinging to her frame, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her swollen belly unmistakable beneath the fabric. In one hand she carried an old leather suitcase, scuffed and heavy, and in the other, a folded letter that trembled slightly in the cold. She was a pregnant widow, carrying both life and loss, and though Alexander had posted an offer for a cook, he had not expected someone whose presence alone told a story of endurance. The moment stretched between them, filled with the howl of the wind and the weight of unspoken truths, until she handed him the letter. He read it quickly, the firelight revealing words written with humility and quiet strength, not begging but asking for dignity. When he looked up, her eyes met his without fear, and something unfamiliar stirred in him. With a single nod, he stepped aside and allowed her into the cabin, unaware that in doing so, he had opened more than just his door. The days that followed unfolded in cautious rhythm. She cooked simple meals that filled the cabin with warmth and memory, transforming the once empty space into something that felt alive. Alexander watched her from a distance, noting her resilience, the way she carried herself with grace despite exhaustion and uncertainty. He spoke little, but his actions softened. Extra firewood by her side, a cleared path through the snow, a blanket left where she would find it. She noticed these things, understanding that kindness sometimes came without words. Slowly they began to talk, sharing fragments of their pasts, his losses buried beneath years of solitude, hers shaped by love taken too soon. Trust grew not in declarations but in shared silence, in the steady comfort of routine, and in the understanding that both had survived more than they spoke aloud. As winter deepened, so did their bond. Alexander found himself protective in ways he had never been before, unsettled by how deeply he cared for the woman and the unborn child she carried. She in turn saw beyond his rugged exterior to the man who listened, who learned, who offered safety without control. One night, as a storm raged outside and fear flickered in her eyes from sudden pain, Alexander stayed awake by the fire, realizing that the solitude he once clung to now felt unbearable without her presence. When he was later injured in an accident, it was she who became his strength, tending his wounds with steady hands and quiet determination, teaching him that strength could exist alongside vulnerability. In caring for one another, the final walls around Alexander's heart crumbled. They spoke honestly of fear, his fear of loss, her fear of hope, and in those confessions, something lasting took root. When labor came during a violent storm that cut them off from the world, Alexander faced the greatest challenge of his life. Guided by her courage and resilience, he stood beside her through the long hours, terrified yet unwavering. When the child's cry finally filled the cabin, echoing against the mountains, Alexander wept openly, holding new life in his arms and understanding, at last, what grace truly meant. Dawn broke over the valley, painting the snow in soft gold, and with it came transformation. The lonely mountain man was no longer alone. The widow was no longer without shelter or support. As winter faded into spring, laughter replaced silence. Footsteps filled the cabin, and travelers spoke not of a fearsome hermit, but of a man changed by compassion and a woman whose strength had taught him humility. Alexander often reflected on the day he paid for a cook, believing he was purchasing labor, only to receive redemption, family, and love instead. He had been taught grace not through words, but through shared hardship, quiet care, and the courage to open his heart again. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that even the coldest winters can give way to hope, then subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of redemption, love, and unexpected grace. Because every journey shared here carries a lesson worth remembering, and the next story may change the way you see the world just as deeply.